The 7th of April, Tuesday morning, 2026. Buddha Dhamma, Chapter 19, The Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth to the way, to the path leading to the end of suffering. From page 1897 to page 1909, 1909. Chapter 19.4, The Four Noble Truths and Dependent Origination, the links of causality. Chapter 19.5, Actions to be performed in relations to the Four Noble Truths. Buddha Dhamma, compiled by Somdet Prat Buddha Gosacharya, English name Page1897. Chapter 19.4, The Four Noble Truths and the Links of the Dependent Origination. Dependent origination and the Four Noble Truths are both central in Buddhist teachings. In answer to the questions, what did Gautama Buddha realized at his enlightenment? It is equally accurate to say that he has realized dependent origination and that he realized the Four Noble Truths. There are passages in the Tipitaka to substantiate both of these claims. This is because these two teachings are essentially the same and point to the same truths. Dependent origination is an essential element of the Four Noble Truths, and the Four Noble Truths incorporates dependent origination. Let us look at the scriptural evidence for this assertion. In one of the baskets, from the three baskets, the Tipitaka, specifically in the Vinaya Pitaka, describes the story of Gautama Buddha's enlightenment, beginning with the time immediately after his enlightenment when for the entire week he experienced bliss of liberation and contemplated dependent origination and their links, both the forward sequence, the arising of suffering, and the reverse sequence, the cessation of suffering. After 7 weeks of experience, the bliss of liberation, Gautama Buddha considered proclaiming the righteous law of Dharma to others, as he had this thought: this righteous Dharma that I have attained is profound, difficult to see, difficult to realize. It is difficult for such degeneration, delighting in attachment, to see this truth, namely, specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it is hard to see this truth, namely, Nibbita, Nibbana, Nirvana. From the Sutra Pitaka, another basket of the Tipitaka, presents a similar descriptions of Gautama Buddha's life story, beginning with the thoughts that led him to go forth and leave his palace, followed by accounts of his own going forth as a renunciant to studying with the ascetics, Alakara and Uttaka. Footnote: these ascetics were versed in Hinduism, Jainism, and certain Buddhism. As we noted earlier yesterday, Tudong is also classified as ascetics, or practicing asceticism, undertaking and relinquishing the practice of extreme asceticism, which is self-mortification and so forth, resuming eating food and then attaining the absorption jhanas, realizing that these forms of knowledge at that time of his awakening. Now, when I had eaten solid food and regained my strength, then quiet, secluded from kamagunas, sensual pleasures, secluded from akusala dhammas, unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first absorption, jhana, the second absorption, the third absorption, the fourth absorption, which has neither pleasure nor pain, purity of sati due to upekha. So, purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. When the mind was concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilements, malleable, wieldy, steady, and interpretable, I directed it to the knowledge of the recollection of the past lives. The first jhana. I recollected my manifold past lives. I directed to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. I saw beings passing away and reappearing. The second knowledge, I directed it to the knowledge of the destruction of the asavas. The third knowledge, I directly knew, as it actually is, this is dukkha. This is the origin of dukkha, samudaya. This is the cessation of dukkha, nirodha. This is the way leading to cessation of dukkha, magga. I directly knew, as it actually is. These are the mental asavas, taints. These is the origins of the asavas, taints. This is the cessation of the asavas, taints. This is the way leading to cessation of asavas, taints. When I knew and I saw thus, my mind was liberated from the taint of sensual desire, kama guna, from the taint of becoming, from bhava tanha, and from the taint of ignorance, avijja. Following these passages are the descriptions from Gautama Buddha's considerations on proclaiming the righteous Dharma, identical to the passage in the Vinaya Pitaka quoted above. The Vinaya Pitaka, one of the bases of the Dipitaka, describes the period immediately following Gautama Buddha's awakening, when the Buddha experienced the bliss of liberation, which the commentaries say lasts for 7 weeks. The description begins with Gautama Buddha's review of the links of causality, dependent origination, and it ends with Gautama Buddha's thoughts on refraining from teaching the law of the righteous Dharma due to complexity and profundity of the dependent origination and nibbana, nirvana. Another basket of the Dipitaka, the Sutra Pitaka, describes the circumstances leading to Gautama Buddha's awakening until he realizes the 3 forms of knowledge. It passes over the period of experience, of bliss, of liberation, and goes directly to the Gautama Buddha's inclination to refrain from teaching. Those people who focuses on the passage in the Vinaya Pitaka, in which Gautama Buddha contemplates the links of causality, dependent origination, and the passages in both the Vinaya and the Sutras, in which Gautama Buddha is considered teaching the righteous Dhamma, will claim that Gautama Buddha realized the link of causality, dependent origination. These people, on the other hand, who focuses on the Sutra passages, especially those describing the realization of the 3 forms of knowledge, and who consider primarily the third knowledge, which is the true essence of awakening. The first 2 forms of knowledge cannot be considered equivalent to the awakening and are not essential for realizing nibbana, nirvana. Will claim that Gautama Buddha realized the 4 noble truths, resulting in the liberation from the taints. Although there are two answers that are both correct, the two teachings have different features and are varying scope of application, and thus should be recognized as distinct from one another. In regard to the similarity between these two teachings, let us review the two distinct cycles of the links of causality, dependent origination, and then compare it to the Four Noble Truths. First, the cycle of origination, samutaya vara, meaning ignorance arises. It transitions into volitional formations. It gives birth. And then it leads to aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, despair arises. The second cycle is the cessation cycle, the nirota vara, meaning ignorance ceases. Ultimately leads to volitional formation, also eliminates. Birth eliminates. Death, aging, sorrow, lamentation, despair all cease or eliminated. The origin or origination cycle, the fourth cycle of dependent origination, is equivalent to the first and the second noble truths, dukkha and samudaya, that there is suffering and what is the origin of suffering. In the Four Noble Truths, the first section of the links of dependent origination is birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, etc., which is the results of tanha and upatana. Tanha is the negative form of desire. Upatana is grasping, holding on to, or clinging to it. It is designated as the first noble truth. It refers to the problems that people encounter and must be rectified. The teaching then returns to the preceding factors. Avijja to bhava. Avijja is ignorance. To bhava. Bhava is the state of becoming, the desire to become. And to designate them as the second noble truth, the source of all human problems. The other cycle, which is the eliminating factor, the reverse cycle, is cessation cycle of the links of causality, dependent origination. It is equivalent to the third noble truth, nirota, cessation. It reveals how problems, when they are properly solved at their root, cease according to the law of cause and effect. Although the cessation cycle is directly associated with the third noble truth, it also includes the fourth noble truth, because the eradication of the problem refers indirectly to the conduct or practice involved in solving these problems. It points to the particular actions required to solve these problems. It is thus possible to condense the Four Noble Truths, resulting in two truths, first and the second, third and the fourth. So, the existence of truths of suffering, the end of the truths of suffering. In some of the sutras, these two cycles of the links of causality dependent originations are used as definitions for the second and the third noble truths. The origination cycle is a definition for the second truth. The cessation cycle is the definition for the third noble truth. In these definitions, however, only tanha, craving, the negative aspect of desire, is revealed as the cause of suffering. And similarly, the end of tanha, the negative aspect of desire, is the definition of nirota, the quelling, the cessation of suffering. This is because tanha, craving, is the most obvious defilement, upakilesas. It plays a dominant role and is thus highlighted for investigation. Despite the abbreviated presentation, you see The entire process of the links of causality dependent origination is implied. The teachings on the links of causality dependent origination and the Four Noble Truths are distinct from each other in the following ways. These two teachings of the same truth, but in the different ways or with different objectives. The links of causality dependent origination describes as an automatic, natural process. The Four Noble Truths, on the other hand, presents a model for wise inquiry and investigation. It leads to practical results, reason analysis, when utilized. The Four Noble Truths corresponds to Gautama Buddha's own search for truth, beginning with its encounters, with its suffering, and its consequent search for the cause of the suffering. He discovered that this search is not in vain. There are indeed a solution. He thus determined the specific points which need to be attended to and set himself a clear, achievable goal. Finally, he carried out the necessary measures to solve the problem until he reached his declared goal. The Four Noble Truths is thus used as a systematized teaching for generating understanding, profiting both the person who presents the teaching and the person who receives it. The links of causality, dependent origination, is the essential dynamic inherent in the Four Noble Truths, which Gautama Buddha, contemplated immediately after his awakening. It is the key teaching which a person must study in order to understand the gist of the Four Noble Truths. The main distinction between these teachings is found in the relation of the cessation cycle of the links of causality, dependent origination, which corresponds to the third and the fourth Noble Truth. That is, the way leading to stop suffering and the path to stop suffering. One who compares the cessation cycle with the third Noble Truth, Nirodha, the cessation cycle, one sees and focuses primarily on the process leading to cessation rather than the state of cessation, Nibbita, Nibbana, Nirvana itself. And for this reason, following Gautama Buddha's awakening while he was considered whether to teach the eternal righteous Dhamma, he distinguished the two truths that he had realized. His first consideration was, this righteous Dhamma that I have attained is profound, difficult to see, difficult to realize. It is difficult for such a generation delighting in attachment to see this truth, namely, specifically, conditionality, dependent origination. This was followed by a second consideration from Gautama Buddha. And it is hard to see this truth, namely the stealing of all formation, sankhara, the abandonment of all formations for dukkha, the end of craving, dispassion, cessation, release, nibbana, nibbita, nirvana. The third Noble Truth, on the other hand, refers principally to the state of nirodha, cessation, although the process leading to the cessation is inherent in it. The cessation cycle of the links of causality dependent origination incorporates the fourth Noble Truth, magga, but it does not clearly mark out a path of practice. It does not clearly specify the details or methods of practical application. What needs to be done for the process to reach completion. This is similar to a doctor who knows how to treat an illness, but neither prescribes medicine nor sets down a treatment plan. In the Four Noble Truths, however, Gautama Buddha specifically distinguished the fourth truth for the purpose of practical application. It is a way of practice that has tested and proved, leads with certainty to the goal of complete and utter freedom. So basically, if it's applied, it will work. The fourth noble truth, Magga, describes spiritual practice in detail, balance, and a comprehensive way. It comprises the entire Buddhist system of practice. It is called the Matthima Patipata, or translated as the middle way of practice, the middle way, which is to be undertaken by people in order to generate results within themselves. So each person needs to apply it personally for themselves. It can't be given. The links of causality, dependent origination, on the other hand, is referred to as the impartial teaching of truth. Mahina Dhamma De Seti, or meaning the middle teaching, which accords with the inherent laws of nature. It encompasses the first three noble truths. Because Magga, the middle way, has distinct features and it's important to distinguish it, it's in unique teaching. In summary, Gautama Buddha made the distinction between the truths that are realized at the time of his awakening. On the other hand, there is a dependent origination and nipita, and on the other hand, the Four Noble Truths. All of these truths are essentially the same, but viewed from different perspectives. Gautama Buddha referred to dependent origination and nipita when he was considering whether to teach the righteous Dhamma, acknowledging how profound these things are and how difficult it is for beings to understand and realize them for themselves. Nipita and dependent origination are the essential qualities realized by Gautama Buddha at the time of his enlightenment. They are the true and pure essence of the righteous Dhamma, extremely difficult to realize. They lie at the heart of the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Gautama Buddha realized the Four Noble Truths when he described his own practice, culminating in his awakening. And then he gave the teachings to others, beginning with the first sermon, on to the will of Dhamma in motion. The Four Noble Truths comprises of the entire range of truths realized by Gautama Buddha. They are organized into a gradual system of coherent, effective teaching, which take into account people's ability to understand these truths and apply them into their lives. Nipita, Nibbana, Nirvana, depending how you read it or enunciate it, and the links of dependent origination, links of causality, are pure natural phenomenon. The noble truths are those matters directly pertaining to human beings. They are presented in a way that it is conducive to understanding and practical application, to be used for themselves, by the wise for themselves. The Four Noble Truths embody the entirety of the righteous Dhamma, whereas the essential and is most difficult to realize qualities of the truth are nipita and the dependent origination. A person who truly understands nipita and dependent origination understands Buddha Dhamma in its entirety, including the Four Noble Truths. I believe that it is reasonable to stop there today because that would be from page 1897 to 1903, as I will leave chapter 19.5, actions to be performed in relation to the Four Noble Truths, on the next one. What we just read is a lot to digest. Buddha Dhamma